UFC 260 will be headlined by the two scariest men in the UFC's heavyweight division. Long gone are the days where the distinction of baddest man on the planet was reserved for the heavyweight boxing champ. That honor will be for the winner of Stipe Miocic or Francis Ngannou. Stipe Miocic has cemented himself as the greatest heavyweight ever in the UFC, and possibly all time, with a historic reign at the top of the division. He's the only heavyweight that's defended his title successfully 3 times and reigned supreme in his trilogy with Daniel Cormier. Opposite of Stipe stands the behemoth from Cameroon, Francis Ngannou. Truly being the definition of a force of nature, Ngannou brings his Ford Escort level of power into every fight. The first fight between these two heavyweights went to Stipe by dominant decision. It was evident that Francis, coming off a 4-fight finish streak, was not ready for Stipe so early into his career. With 5 more fights under his belt, Francis has meticulously worked his way back to the top, amassing a 4 knockout streak in under 3 minutes of total ring time. Both fighters have accomplished a lot since their first meeting, and their second is sure to be amazing. Now, let's take a look at the tail of the tape. Both men have identical heights at 6 foot 4 inches tall. Stipe Miocic has a reach of 80 inches, while Francis Ngannou sports a reach of 84 inches. Stipe has a finish rate of 75%, while Ngannou has a perfect finish rate of 100%. First, let's take a look at the grappling of both of these men and how they stack up. Stipe Miocic has a takedown per 15 minute stat of 1.92 and a takedown defense of 70%. Unlike most heavyweights, Stipe has mastered the art of grappling and has used it to his advantage. The best example of this is his first fight with Francis Ngannou. Being cautious of Ngannou's power, Stipe relied heavily on his wrestling to nullify Francis and dominate his way to a victory. Stipe has an array of takedowns in his arsenal, with his favorite techniques being the power double or single leg. Once he's on the ground, he's able to use his positioning to tire out his opponents. One of his favorite positions is side control. He's able to nullify his opponent's movements and land shots of his own while in this position, not rushing anything or giving up position. This is a great position to be in for any fighter, but especially as a heavyweight, as it makes other heavyweights exhausted and helps Stipe close the fight out in later rounds. Although Stipe boxes in most of his fights, knowing that wrestling base is there is what makes him a champion caliber fighter. When it comes to Francis and takedowns, well, he just doesn't do it. He has a takedown accuracy of 0%, and that's because he's never landed one in the UFC. That doesn't mean Francis has a non-existent grappling game. In fact, 4 of his 15 finishes are via submission, including a beautiful Kimura on Anthony Hamilton, his only submission win in the UFC. Francis sports a takedown defense of 71%, which is a strong enough number to help him keep the fight where he wants it, on the feet. Ngannou was a boxer before an MMA fighter and has very little wrestling experience compared to most UFC fighters. His lack of experience in that field is what cost him the win in the first fight, so depending on how much he's grown in that area will be key in this rematch. Next, let's take a brief look at the clinch game of both of these powerhouses. Of the two, Stipe is definitely the one that utilizes the clinch more often in his game. Stipe is not as heavy as a lot of heavyweights in the division, being only 245 pounds, so he uses the clinch as his equalizer in a lot of his fights. Stipe likes to push his opponents up against the cage and grab 1 or 2 underhooks. In the event he only gets 1 underhook, he'll use his hand to grab his opponent's arm and either land a blow of his own or quickly break with a strike while nullifying his opponent's strong hand. He will also use it as a tactic to wear on the cardio of his opponents, which, as we know, is a weak spot for many heavyweights. Francis, on the other hand, likes to avoid the clinch as much as possible. He does his best work at range and away from his opponent's grasp. If he's ever caught in the clinch position, Francis will use his overwhelming strength to get underhooks and escape as soon as possible. Not the most technical escape, but it doesn't usually matter to him. Now, let's talk about the most exciting aspect of this fight, the standout. Stipe is what all heavyweights of the future should strive to be. He's not your typical heavyweight who only relies on size and power and a puncher's chance. He is a complete mixed martial artist, and this holds true for his stand-up game. Stipe likes to use volume and power to wear his opponents down until they succumb. His favorite combo is a simple 1-2, much like Kelvin Gastelum. Consistently landing this combo has allowed him to break the will of his opponents and put them to sleep. Stipe is still a heavyweight, and all heavyweights own a power strike. For Miocic, that is his right hook. Because of the volume and combos Stipe throws, his opponents fall into a false sense of security thinking Stipe won't throw a bomb, but that is exactly when the champ executes his finisher. Stipe has one of the meanest right hooks in the game, and it's slept a fair share of heavyweights in the UFC. Along with his striking, Stipe is incredibly nimble and agile. To avoid getting knocked out by some of the scariest men in the UFC, Stipe uses excellent head movement and speed to avoid the punches. Unlike many heavyweights who are one and done with their strikes, Stipe throws efficient combos, which is what sets him apart. Next, let's take a look at the challenger. His nickname is the Predator, and that should give you all the information you truly need. Francis Ngannou is the scariest power puncher we have ever seen in the UFC. To put it into perspective, during Francis's current 4-fight win streak, he's accumulated a total fight time of 2 minutes and 42 seconds. You heard me, 4 wins in 2 minutes and 42 seconds. But power isn't enough. Francis is able to decimate his opponents due to his elite striking IQ, especially when it comes to countering. Francis's opponents are aware of his power, and naturally, there comes some fear with engaging. When his opponents become overly wary and overcommit, Francis will make you pay. The most common example is opponents overcommitting to an overhand and having their head sent to the moon with a hyper uppercut. Francis has the deadliest uppercut in the UFC, and he's used it time and time again to send some of the sport's legends into oblivion. Although Francis does rely on power, it is backed by technical prowess. Take a look at his KO of Oliveira. Francis was able to pick his shots through his opponent's guard and combo that with his otherworldly power. Unlike most power punchers, Ngannou doesn't pressure much, but waits for his opponent to make a mistake, and they almost always do. Now, how do these two match up against one another? In a unique scenario, we already know how these two have matched up before. Although Francis was clearly the more dangerous and powerful puncher, it didn't matter much. Stipe was able to use his wrestling, clinch work, and extensive MMA experience to exhaust Francis and rode his way to a dominant decision victory. Francis did land some blows, but was nowhere near dethroning the champ. Over 3 years has passed since then, and many things have changed. Francis was pushed way too hard by the UFC, and he himself has admitted that it got to his head. This time around, he has looked more focused and looked hungry to be crowned a champion. Cardio was a weak point, and he has made an effort to drop weight and lace up his running shoes. Stipe, on the other hand, went on to fight Daniel Cormier in their trilogy, which pushed Miocic to look better than ever, both in his striking and cardio. Although this will be a different matchup, some aspects will stay true. Stipe is still the much better wrestler and grappler compared to Francis, and Francis is clearly the hardest hitter in the UFC. In this fight, Francis will have to learn to better implement his takedown defense and keep Stipe at a range while trying to pick his shots. Not focusing on counters and headhunting is what cost him the first time. Stipe, on the other hand, will have to utilize the same game plan as the first fight. Has Francis learned from his previous defeat and improved his cardio, or will we see the same outcome? There's always something special about a UFC heavyweight title fight. The promos, the highlights, and the fighters always get an MMA fan more excited than an average bout. The undisputed heavyweight GOAT will enter the octagon yet again against the scariest knockout artist we have ever laid eyes on, to crown the baddest man on the planet. Who comes out on top? We'll find out at UFC 260. Make sure you check out our new Discord channel. It's a place where you can talk MMA with like-minded fans, share memes, and do so much more. The link will be in the description below. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed our content, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see much more MMA content coming in the near future.